Well, good morning, everybody. Great to see you here. My name is Peter Kallstrom. I'm the CEO of the Workforce Partnership, and it's my honor to welcome you back in person. It was about 3 years ago. It was the fall of 2019 when we had our last Workforce Frontiers Symposium in this very space, and then the world changed. But it's so great to be back and be here to discuss this really critically important topic that we'll be going into in depth with today. And before I introduce the supervisor, I just want to acknowledge the advisory committee that made this report possible, the staff of Supervisor Nathan Fletcher's team and the Workforce Partnership staff, and also Andy Hall, who consults now and really brought this report together and helped codify this vision and really make it possible. So it was a huge team effort to make it possible. The report is phenomenal, and it's really groundbreaking. Maybe the only one in the country that's really addressing this crisis that is not just a County of San Diego issue, but it's across the country, and it takes action in order to really solve what's before us. But today is possible because of the vision of Chairman Nathan Fletcher, who has been addressing this issue for some time and really zeroed in and realized that something had to be done, more than just talk about it and hope somebody was going to deal with it, but really grapple with the immense challenge, but know that with the right partners and funding and interventions that we can solve this problem before us. And Nathan made it possible, and it's my honor to welcome him to the stage. So please join me in welcoming Chairman Supervisor Nathan Fletcher.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning. Good morning. Oh man, y'all are sounding a little sleepy this morning. It is wonderful to look out and see so many of you who have worked with us, not only in this effort, but have been so committed to this field for so many years. People that have been working and toiling and striving and doing incredible work long before I ever joined the Board of Supervisors, and will continue to do it long after I'm gone. And I want to recognize and acknowledge that. We talk a lot about changing the societal stigma. We talk about providing a better way to deliver behavioral health care, and none of that in any way is a reflection on any shortcoming of anyone who's involved in this work today. The people that are involved in this work today have been ahead of the curve in recognizing what needs to happen. The change that needs to happen at the policymaker level. It needs to happen at the level where people are making decisions about where we fund, staff, site, reimburse, and commit our efforts to that. And so I want to commend each and every one of you who give your entire life and your heart and soul to helping those who are in need, and give a round of applause to all of you. We are incredibly grateful for all the work you've been doing and appreciate your partnership as we move forward. So thank you all very, very much. I want to acknowledge my incredible colleague, Supervisor Lawson-Riemer, who's here today, who has really added so much to our board, a level of expertise, commitment, and drive, someone who has a great interest in issues of behavioral health, and has just really been a tremendous add to our Board of Supervisors. 3 years ago when I joined the board, I made a commitment that we have to address a lot of things. There are a lot of issues that come before you in the position that you face, and you have to deal with all of those things, but you also need to have a focus and a prioritization. Coming out of the legislature many years ago, I came to the realization that too many elected officials try to do too many things of very little significance or depth. And that perhaps we'd be better served if we would identify a few priority areas and focus on them and try to make significant progress. And as a candidate for the Board of Supervisors, I said issues of behavioral health would be my highest priority. And we built our time and our calendar and our schedule and our staff around driving and implementing those types of things. And in the last 3 years, we have seen the county do more than they have ever done before. Significant increases in investment and prioritization and focus. But we're not here today to resuscitate all the things that have been done. We're here today, I think, to not just receive a report, but we're here today to mark a moment in San Diego. And that moment is really rooted in two things. One, the ongoing acknowledgement that no one entity alone can address this issue. This issue is much bigger and more complex than just county government. County government's got to do more. significantly more. State government's got to do more, but the reality is issues of behavioral health are so intertwined across our community that it takes everyone in this room committing to saying we're all going to be a part of continuing to drive solutions. And when we talk about these issues of behavioral health workforce, it requires each and every one of us, and whatever organization or entity that you are a part of, to have that same level of commitment moving forward. But the second thing that I think is very significant is we've successfully, I think, moved the discussion away from when I was elected to a singular focus on how many locked inpatient psych beds do we need, to an acknowledgement that the need for those is a damning indictment of our failure to hold people at lower level of acuity. And now we're living in the space about community care and care coordination and those types of things. But the second shift that I think today, hopefully in my mind, signifies is a shift that moves us away from talking about programs, buildings, and beds, and one that incorporates talking about people. Because a program does not help anybody. A program by itself is a name, has a reimbursement stream, but that program is only as effective as the workers who are involved in treating people. A building by itself, nobody's life was ever made better because there was a nice new building to go to. That building is just walls. It is the people who work in that building. It is the individuals who provide care and compassion and expertise. A bed by itself might give you somewhere to sleep, but it's not going to make you better. It is the staff who help the individuals who are in that bed. And I think that today is a deep acknowledgement that we have a long way to go as a region in making sure that we are investing in the people who provide this care. And there are so many incredible things that are coming out of this report. And when we outlined it, I was very clear at the outset. I'm not interested in your typical commission steering committee report that says, here's the problem, and then the recommendation says, tell nonprofits to work with universities to come up with creative solutions. That doesn't help anybody. I mean, that doesn't help anybody. Then you have an event just like this and you celebrate it and then nothing happens. We wanted specific recommendations, and you have them, 92 pages of them. Exactly how many workers we need in each classification, from peer support specialist to psychiatrist. How many do we need? And then specific recommendations on how you uniquely fill each of those roles. How do we get you the supervised hours you need? How do we get you the internships you need? How do we create a pipeline and training? How do we tell someone who can't go 2 years without working to feed their kids that you should get this certificate and get this program? These are all of the things that are baked into this report. How do we pay you better? The simple reality is, what was so stunning when you listen to the workers and you read this, is how much people deeply love the work that they do. Some of the hardest work you can imagine, and how much they deeply love what they do. But the simple reality that someone who's trained to provide care and love and compassion and potentially turning a life around cannot be paid less than someone who works at Chick-fil-A. They can't. We got to pay them. We have to retain them. We have to make sure they're not experiencing burnout. We have to support them. We have to open up pipelines for achievement. And we have to really think about doing things differently than we've ever done before. And that is why we're here today. I would say nowhere in America has built out the system of behavioral health care to provide the right care to the right person at the right time. And I want San Diego to be the first. Nowhere in America has done a report of this level, with this granularity, with this specific recommendations. And I want us to not be the first ones to do the report. I want us to be the first ones to implement the recommendations and finding. And so the work today that we focus on is, how do we build out the behavioral health workforce we need so we can achieve a simple goal? And that goal is back to what I said earlier: the right person can get the right care at the right time. And that is not just the unsheltered individual who's on the street. That is every one of our kids, that we break the cycle of taking our kids to get a physical. We take them to get a wellness check. We embrace what may be their early struggles, and we provide them help and care. And we do that across the continuum so that we get to a place where it is no different if you are diabetic than if you suffer from depression. But in order to do that, we have a long way to go. And so I am so grateful and appreciative of all of the work that has been done. As chair of the Board of Supervisors and member of the Board of Supervisors, I am fully committed to doing our part. One of the recommendations is very specific to the county. We got to lift the administrative burden on folks. We have to lift the administrative burden to free our workers up to be able to do the work. There will always be accountability, but we've got to change. Something that was put in place 10 or 20 years ago, it doesn't make any sense today. So the county, we're going to do our part. I'm going to continue to do my part, pushing the state, convening, leading, and moving. But the reality is it is going to take each and every single one of us, and we're going to talk today a lot about the implementation plan and the reality that do not leave this room without signing up to be a part of the group of folks that are going to come together regularly to talk about what we're doing to implement, to assign tasks out to various groups, to lobby, to advocate, to push, because all of the work that we've done to get to the point today will be a tremendous disservice if we just let it sit here. Today is the beginning of our process. The issuance of the report is not the end of the process. It is merely the beginning, and so we have to move forward. Before I wrap up, I'd like to ask each of the members of the steering committee to please stand and recognize an incredible amount of work over the course of a year plus. If you were a part of the steering committee, please stand. We appreciate you. And to Andy and Peter and team at the beginning, I outlined really what we wanted out of this, and you all delivered exactly what we needed. Not because it's what I wanted, because it's what our region needs in order to do it. And in closing, I'll just say when I started and said we'll make this a priority, everyone said you can't, it's too complicated, it's convoluted, it's all of these types of things. And you know, there's a great line that you can be an idealist without illusion. I believe that we can build a better way to deliver behavioral health care. I believe we can help everyone from children in our schools to kids in juvenile hall to those that are in our correctional facilities to the homeless and unsheltered to people that have experienced trauma, but I am under no illusion that it is easy. And so I ask you to join us outside the wall of my office. We have a sign that says we only do hard things. We only do hard things. Other people get elected, they can do easy things. We don't want to do easy things, we want to do hard things. Because the hard things are the ones that will have the most impact. And so I ask you to join with us today in this effort to implement the findings of this report and be willing to get uncomfortable, to roll up your sleeves, and to really help us all push together. And if we all come together, we can see significant progress, and the people that benefit will have a significant improvement in their lives. So thank you all. I look forward to being here the entire day with you and appreciate all of the work to help get us to this point. Thank you all.
Thank you, Chair Fletcher, for so passionately outlining the county's vision on how we can all come together today to address and start fixing the worker shortage challenge that we face. My name is Parikh, Vice President of Sector Initiatives at the San Diego Workforce Partnership, and I will serve as your MC. Today, we recognize the culmination of work performed by experts in the San Diego community who have a vested interest in ensuring that we fulfill the recommendations outlined in the report and summarized in the bifold you received this morning. You'll notice in your program that we have a diverse group of speakers comprised of policymakers, economists, behavioral health experts, and leaders in impact investing. We feature panelists who will focus on 3 key areas: establishing regional training centers of excellence, creating registered apprenticeships, and the impact of the psychiatrist shortage. Thank you again to the San Diego Workforce Behavioral Steering Committee and to the county for your commitment. In this next section, San Diego Workforce Partnership's Chief Economist, Daniel Enermark, and his colleague, Dr. Karen Boyd, will help unpack the worker shortage in San Diego. In addition to using publicly available jobs, wage, turnover, retirement, and demand for behavioral health services data, Daniel and Karen surveyed and conducted focus groups with 1,600 San Diego behavioral health services workers and students. At the Workforce Partnership, we believe that no talent strategy is complete without input from the workers themselves. Welcome, Daniel and Karen.
Thanks, Brina. And thank you all for being here today. It's really nice to meet some of you for the first time in person and find out how tall you are. That's what everybody always says to me. I'm Daniel Uttermark. I'm the chief economist at the San Diego Workforce Partnership, and I'm here with my colleague and fellow economist, Dr. Karen Boyd, to talk about this study. Really, what we did is three things. We did an analysis of the unmet need. We did an analysis of compensation, and then we listened to workers to find out what the other challenges are that they face. And today, I drew the short straw, so I get to talk about the first two things, and Karen gets to talk about the cool things. So we really are the first group to engage workers at this level. This is really a one-of-a-kind study. So to begin with, many of you know better than I what behavioral health is, but for those of you who might be new to it, in this study, we really focus, when we talk about behavioral health and the behavioral health system, we're talking about the system that provides treatment for people experiencing mental illness and substance use disorder. And it's about 1 in 7 San Diego County residents who experience mental illness. And then about 100,000 individuals who have substance use disorder. And there's about 17,000 people in that system across a wide variety of occupations, from community health and peer support workers to marriage and family therapists and social workers and psychiatrists. And the current workforce is meeting a lot of the behavioral health need, but not all of it. In the 3 years since Chair Fletcher took office, the behavioral health budget has increased by 70%. It's an incredible, incredible strengthening of this crucial system. Yeah. And, unfortunately, the chair inherited years and years of underinvestment in behavioral health. And what happens when we underinvest in behavioral health, what are the consequences? What does it matter if there's unmet need? Well, the first cost and the most tragic is the human cost, the cost of lives. There are 400 people in San Diego who die by suicide every year, and another 1,000 who die due to an overdose. And all of these individuals, mental illness and substance use disorder play an important role in those deaths. We can't afford to lose 1,400 of our neighbors. We can't. And those who are living often encounter other challenges: homelessness, incarceration, probation, parole, right? These are thousands, tens of thousands of people who deal with the consequences of unmet need of mental illness and substance use disorder. And it's not just the human cost, although I think we all agree that that's the most important cost. There's also a tremendous economic cost to dealing with the downstream consequences of unmet behavioral health needs. It's a lot more expensive to fix the problem after we failed to address it when it was the stage of mental illness, substance use disorder, but not homelessness, crime, etc. So, I mentioned that there's this unmet need. And what we did in our analysis was to say, well, what if we scaled up the behavioral health workforce to address that unmet need? Now, we can scale up the behavioral health workforce to address all of the mental illness need. It's a challenge with substance use disorder because of the nature of addiction. There are many people who are not open to receiving treatment. But we worked with epidemiologists and experts at the county, and actually experts from around the country, to identify what would be an appropriate target based on the number of people we believe would be open to receiving treatment, because we know that there are people who right now want substance use treatment who have to wait for far too long to receive it. So we know we've got 17,000 workers. In order to meet the unmet need, we believe that we need to add another 8,100 workers today. That's a 50% increase in the size of the workforce today. We can't hire 8,000 people today, unfortunately. So our plan looks forward 5 years. And we say, okay, if we could scale up the behavioral health workforce for the next 5 years, how many individuals would we need? Well, first of all, we need the people that we need to meet the demand today, the 17,000 plus the 8,100. Then we'd need 7,800 to account for turnover. 7,800 people are likely to leave the profession over the next 5 years. They're going to retire, they're going to leave San Diego, they're going to leave the field. Finally, we expect there to be another 2,600 people we need to meet the growing demand. As the stigma around mental illness and substance use disorder decreases, and as the options for receiving treatment increase, more and more people will seek out these services, and we expect there to be an increase in demand. So when you take all of these 3 additional categories and put them together, we're talking about 18,500 more workers needed in this workforce. Compare that to the fact that the entire workforce right now is slightly smaller than that, 17,000 people. Over the next 5 years, we need to recruit more people than currently work in this field. That's a very, very tall order. That's why we've got 92 pages of recommendations about how to do that. The first challenge is the one that we addressed in the compensation analysis. I didn't want to distract you with all the titles of every occupation here, but each one of these columns is an occupation, and each orange donut is where we pay, okay? And each blue circle is where another metropolitan statistical area in California pays. So see, we're toward the bottom on every one of these occupations. Peer support specialists are paid less after adjusting for cost of living in San Diego than in any other MSA. There are other MSAs that pay psychiatrists twice as much as we do. Literally off the chart. I didn't have room on the slide for it, okay? This is a problem. We can't recruit and retain people if we aren't paying them. And as I mentioned before, the budget for behavioral health has increased by 70% since Chair Fletcher took office. But we're stuck with low wages because there's a lot of steps we could take to address this, but one of the challenges is that the way that the county designs contracts is based on Bureau of Labor Statistics data on how much people are paid. So at the county, we're looking at, well, how much were you paid yesterday? That's how much we should budget for you tomorrow. The problem is that if you had low wages yesterday, you never can climb out of that problem. So we need to think creatively at the county about how we can reassess our budgeting process to allocate more money for contracts so that people can be paid a living wage. So yeah. So with that, I'll hand it off to Karen, who will tell you the fun part.
Ooh. If we're going to meet our ambitious goal of more than doubling our behavioral health workforce, we need to attract more workers and convince them to stay. In order to figure out how to make these occupations sustainable and attractive, we talked to 30 workers in focus groups and interviews to listen to what they had to say about their jobs. And then we used the insights we learned there to build a survey so we could see how prevalent these perspectives and issues were across the behavioral health workforce in the county. Almost 1,600 workers, local behavioral health workers, responded to this survey. If there's anyone in this room who participated in either the focus groups or the survey, I want to say very sincerely, thank you for sharing your voices with us. We couldn't have done this without you. Yeah. The headline is, there's a, oops, sorry, no, that was me. The headline is there's a lot we can improve on. 44% of respondents said they were somewhat or extremely likely to look for a new job in the next year. This is high compared to the literature, including compared to other behavioral health studies. So we asked respondents about their satisfaction across different areas of their jobs to get a better picture of what's going on here. As Daniel described earlier, our pay compares unfavorably to other cities in California, so it won't be surprising to hear that of the 37 questions that we asked about satisfaction, workers were least satisfied with their pay. Here's an example from one of the participants from the focus groups. Panda Express was hiring at the exact same wage. I had completed a 2-year certificate. I had done hundreds of hours of unpaid internship, and I had years of experience. I helped the interns in my program. I was training people. It really felt demeaning. We cannot build strong career pathways without addressing this issue. I spoke to 2 substance use disorder workers who had considered going for their masters, but the reality of pay across the profession dissuaded them from doing so. In fact, one of these participants I'm about to read you a quote from was already retraining when we spoke. There's a counselor who had 10 years experience, and he's the only counselor in the county who is both credentialed and bilingual in a particular language. They paid him $18.50. They wouldn't even pay him $20 an hour with 10 years experience. And that's what got me to go back to school to change professions. For context, Target's entry-level wage around here is $24 an hour. I had to take out personal loans to cover my groceries. Rent is a whole paycheck. I've thought about going to grad school, but is it really worth it to go thousands of dollars in debt for $2 more an hour? I want to do this for the rest of my life. I love it. I've always wanted to work with formally justice-involved people. It makes me sad, but I don't think I'll be able to do this for the rest of my life. This quote brings up another problem that compounds the issue of pay, and that is the cost of training. Our survey revealed that our local behavioral health workforce is shouldering a huge student debt burden. The average worker took out $77,000 of student debt and has a payment of $484 a month. This, of course, workers who have a higher training burden, like psychiatrists, have more student debt on average, but it would be a mistake to assume that occupations that don't require a bachelor's degree have workers without a significant student debt burden. Workers in public behavioral health do have access to the Public Student Loan Forgiveness Program, but throughout our focus groups and surveys, workers expressed a lot of frustration with this program. Our report offers some specific ideas for addressing the cost of training, and I expect you'll hear more about that over the course of the day. But the takeaway here is that lowering the cost of training and offering reliable student loan support is crucial to making sure that these occupations are a viable option for more workers. On-the-job stress is a big problem for our survey respondents. If we hadn't fielded these focus groups and interviews, though, we might have assumed that this was the stress of working with patients, right? People are talking to you about their trauma all day, every day. You're hearing about these people you've built relationships with relapsing and overdosing. And we did hear stories about that. It's a stressful job. However, much more often, when our focus group respondents talked about stress, they talked about it in the context of documentation audits, and caseload. It's good news that our behavioral health workers can and are able to deal with the stress of this really difficult work, and it's good to know that we have the power to impact some of the major drivers of stress for folks. We've got a quote as an example here. Being extremely short-staffed, it's brutal. I'm burned out and I'm really white-knuckling it. Being hypervigilant in this way is not conducive to being a good clinician. Behavioral health clinicians we spoke to were very clear about the importance of documenting their work, but they expressed frustration with redundant forms, frequency of changes in documentation requirements, inconsistent enforcement through audits year to year, huge consequences of small errors, and disconnection between the reality of care and the documentation requirements. Workers reported that the documentation, particularly in public behavioral health provision, was limiting them from giving the quality and quantity of care that they wanted to give. Our focus group respondents described the documentation burden as impossible, unsustainable, backbreaking, untenable, and unethical. They described audits as merciless, demoralizing, pathological, and brutal. An ad hoc committee was formed in response to these findings, and we really hope that their report will catalyze and guide action on this obviously crucial issue of putting people before paperwork. And I'll pass it off to Daniel, who has some more encouraging news for you.
So the first piece of encouraging news is that we have leadership at the county that is willing to tackle this. You know, we work for the county, and the county was the client on this project. And so I was a little worried about including all of this gory detail about documentation. It was actually Chair Fletcher in one of our steering committee meetings who said, no, put it in the report. And so, you know, that kind of leadership. You know, if you don't have that, we can report until we're blue in the face. But that's the first piece of good news we have. And the second piece of good news is that people love this work. They want to help people. You know, they said, I really do enjoy the population I work with. I went into this field for that purpose. I could make 4 times as much as a private practice psychologist, but I like working with this population. And that way we think it's ours to lose. You know, most people don't intend to leave San Diego. It's the greatest place on earth. It really is. And they don't want to leave San Diego. They don't want to leave the field because they love their work. We just have to make it possible for them to do that work. I'll leave you with this quote. If I could stay working as a counselor, I would. I love my job so much. But I got to this point where I felt like I could not possibly stay. And all we have to do is make it possible for people to stay by addressing wages, by addressing documentation, by addressing all of the issues that we'll be talking about over the next couple hours. So thank you so much for being here with us. We really, really appreciate it.
Thank you, Daniel and Karen, for your unique insight and understanding into the worker shortage. As you shared, hearing directly from professionals about their own experiences helped drive clarity and urgency on the most important issues related to what is impacting our workforce today. So, we wanted to give you a small taste of those frontline perspectives. Please welcome Nate Howard, artist, poet, and CEO of Movement B, a nonprofit providing direct behavioral health services to youth in San Diego. Nate, the stage is yours.
And when does a story end? The life you lead is the legacy you leave. My eulogy was read by a stranger, full of love but with misplaced anger. I never knew I inspired you. Just breathe. Life is too short. Enjoy this moment. They hate me because I'm positive. The negativity multiplies, and the result is still positive. Tell your story before they do. Here's to celebrating the accomplishment that they said we wouldn't make it, but they have to keep watching it. I am the greatest, and I know that. I am the greatest, and I have shown that. I am the greatest, and I own that. This is my story, but when does it end? The life you lead is the legacy you leave. My eulogy was read by a stranger, full of love but with misplaced anger. I never knew I inspired you. Good morning.
My name is Nate Howard. I'm the founder and executive director of Movement B. And if you don't remember anything that I told you today, remember that I told you to tell your story before they do. So we're going to practice that. When I say tell your story, you say before they do. We got it? Tell your story. Before they do. All right. Tell your story. Before they do. So everybody in San Diego can hear you. Tell your story. Before they do. Who is they? I started Movement B as a way of telling my story before they do. But the question was, who was I fighting? This was a you versus you battle. And I realized that my story came from the unacknowledged world. And it's the reason why I'm a poet and a spoken word artist, and that I teach youth and young people how to tell their story through creative writing. We say that the poet is the least liar. Now, I'm not saying poets don't lie, but what's the point? And so when we think about poetry and creative writing, we think about narrative therapy. When somebody is writing your story and they're stereotyping you, labeling you, making you feel less than, and you try to fight them back, you're giving them power as if they are the author of your story, asking them to revise your story to their liking. And that happened to me countless times, where here I am swinging at the air metaphorically, trying to get them to understand me, and in my mind, I'm going through a mental breakdown. When we talk about behavioral health, when we talk about mental health, first we have to talk about the story that we're telling ourselves. Life, death, and the pursuit of purpose. Up and down lately, I was feeling worthless. But you helped me out. We went soul searching for the answer to my misery, but nothing's working. Who am I? Far from perfect. A soul misunderstood, the pain and hurting yourself from lack of dream chasing, body racing, fear facing emotions. I rose up, I chose up, I'm finally in focus. Picture that, visionary, extraordinary gifts. No more doubts or worries of what my true potential is, but I cried myself to sleep. I'm afraid of being worthless. I'm afraid if we keep hoping for change, I'm afraid we'll still be hoping. I rose up, I chose up, I'm finally in focus. Picture that, Instagram of what I'm really smoking. A marijuana for the marathon, steady pace, I keep going, back and forth with my emotions, afraid of who I am. Am I really worth it? Life, death, and the pursuit of purpose. Up and down lately, I was feeling worthless, but you helped me out. We went soul searching. You helped me out. We went soul searching. I rose up. I chose up. I'm finally in focus. I am the greatest, and I know that. I'm the greatest, and I own that. Somebody helped me out from going back and forth. I'm a walking contradiction. I'm realistic fiction. I'm a humble narcissist. I'm a motivated pessimist. I'm black and criminal. Or is that one and the same? According to All Lives Matterverse, Black Lives Matterverse, whose life matters? Aren't we all the same? Bunch of he say, she say, bunch of they say, we say, bunch of hoopla confusion while things never change. Victim mentalities with victor pursuits, keynote speeches with funeral suits. If I speak, it'll kill me. They don't really want the truth. Because who I am is really you. What's a part of me is a part of you. What makes me special makes you special too. Life, death, and the pursuit of purpose. Up and down lately, I was feeling worthless, but you helped me out. We went soul searching. You helped me out. We went soul searching. I rose up. I chose up. I'm finally in focus. I am the greatest, and I know that. I'm the greatest, and I own that. Somebody helped me out from going back and forth. Our tombstone holds our birth date, our death date, and that little dash in between that I'm steady hanging on, trying to figure out what life really means. Will I live life to the best of me, or will I live it with other people telling my story? Tell your story before they do, and truly be. You see, our work in Movement B is about allowing people to just be. Grass doesn't try to grow, it grows. Birds don't try to fly, they fly. I tell my students all the time, you live in your mind all day, you might as well make it a good place to live. And you see, the stress of our mental health or behavioral health starts in our schools. It starts in our youth. And we have to remind them to just be. We launched our Movement B Center off 68th and El Cajon last year. It was an abandoned building that we turned into a youth center. Realizing that some of our youth centers and our youth programs lack that idea of connecting with the student at their core of who you are. We heard earlier about the populations that may be struggling, and we already know. Youth impacted by homelessness, the foster care system, low socioeconomic backgrounds, and the cycle continues. Broken families create broken children, and the cycle continues because those broken children become broken parents, and it continues and it continues. Our solution is continuing to bring art back to our schools, back to our youth, and back to our families. When you're writing your poem or you're creating a creative story, you're allowing yourself to heal. When we say poetry is the voice of the unacknowledged world, I'm not coming up here trying to be politically correct. I am just allowing my art to show. It's a mosaic, it's beauty in all of these different colors. Those stories combined with other stories that have been unheard creates a new narrative. Those are the stories we begin to amplify. We're also working on a Movement B application that allows those stories to be connected to social emotional learning. And if you work in the education system, SEL is big within our schools. We might measure our students by their grades. We may know their student ID number, but we realize that they're more than a number. And how we begin to measure students by their emotional well-being and being intentional about that, knowing that since 2020, since this pandemic started, we don't have to wait and ask if there's something going wrong with our students and families. We already know. And when does the story end? The life you lead is the legacy you leave. My eulogy was read by a stranger, full of love but with misplaced anger. I never knew I inspired you. Just breathe. Life is too short. Enjoy this moment. They hate me because I'm positive. The negativity multiplies, and the result is still positive. Tell your story before they do. Here's to celebrating the accomplishment that they said we wouldn't make it, but guess what? They have to keep watching it. I am the greatest, and I know that. I am the greatest, and I own that. I am the greatest, and I've shown that. This is my story, but when does it end? The life you lead is the legacy you leave. One more time before I leave. When I say tell your story, you say before they do. Tell your story. Tell your story. So everybody in San Diego can hear you and that we can really make a change. Tell your story. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nate, for telling your story. We've had Movement B at several events in the pre-COVID era, and they always bring the house down. Nate will be available at the break and after the event to share more about how to partner with Movement B and his team of peer support professionals. But we now have Dr. Luke Bergman, Director of County Behavioral Health Services, who will provide a clinician's perspective on the human toll of the worker shortage. Welcome, Dr. Bergman.
Yeah, I guess I'll have a mic. Jesus. So I'm a bureaucrat. Is this working? No, it's not. Good.
Hello? Here.
Is it working now? Great. So I'm a bureaucrat. I'm the kind of bureaucrat, I think, right, of focus in today's conversation. And it cannot be an accident that a bureaucrat was put following that incredible presentation. There is definitely purpose in that. But actually, and I had some thoughts, like I often do. that I imagined I would share, but I sort of feel like they must have known I would, a bit upended by the previous presentation, and want to just sort of pick up on that refrain around the importance of us telling our story before they do. And they evoke this question, who is the they? Who am I fighting? I don't know if that was answered in the previous presentation, and I don't know if there is an easy, at the ready answer for that. But I think that's a question that it is really worth doggedly pursuing for us in order to make the kind of impact that is proportional to the data that were presented before. I think we really need to sort of see where it is that we can take the kind of instrumental, like the kind of bureaucratic action that's going to make the, frankly, radical change that needs to happen. And for me, that kind of like begins with an acknowledgement of what American healthcare is, right? And how it functions and how it is sustained, which is, I think, a thing that we far too often, those of us who work in this world, don't like step back from and deeply question. We accept it as a kind of inevitability, that the system that governs, that pays for, that sustains, that undermines, that erodes, that destroys the healthcare that we have in this country, we don't step back from it, usually sufficiently to really question its kind of fundamental anchoring. And part of what I think this moment offers us as an opportunity is that it proposes that question. And as the bureaucrat in the House, the much beloved bureaucrat, Alfredo Aguirre is here also. So let's sort of divide some of the derision. As the bureaucrat, I just want to note that the rousing language that has been used thus far to describe the situation that we're in and what it is that we need to do in order to make things right is not just the language of elected politicians, even elected politicians with beautiful oratory and deep feeling for the circumstances that we're in, which I know to be the case of Nathan Fletcher. It is also the language that bureaucrats are receptive to and determined, this one at least, to have inform our thinking about how it is that we need to do things differently. So when we do step back, just a step or two from the basic moorings of American healthcare, what are the simple things that we know about it? It's really expensive, right? Extremely expensive. Do we all know that? Like in this country in particular, relative to other developed so-called first world countries, it is off the rails expensive here. And what are the sort of like driving mechanisms of all of that cost, of all of that sort of inflated expense? Lots and lots of transactions. Many, many different sorts of transactions had between care providers, people they care for, and then had between legions of administrators and the people actually doing this work. And at each of those transactional junctures, there's an estimation of cost, there's a calculation of payment, and there's usually, he takes a pregnant pause, there is usually an opportunity for profit. And the system is designed in a way that we are all always, those of us working in this field, looking for that margin between cost and payment, looking for where there is an opportunity to increase that profit. we look, in other words, and we think about our healthcare in terms of procedures, right? Distinct units of interaction, of contact. And we pay for those procedures. And you know what? They're incredibly effective, right? We know that. In behavioral health, even. I was listening to Tom Insel. People know of Tom Insel? He was the state's mental health czar not too long ago before he split. He recently wrote a book, and he notes in the book how incredibly effective behavioral health procedures are. Treatments that we have developed work extremely well. Then why are they not having a more dramatic impact on the work that we do? Why is suffering in the realm of behavioral health so pronounced right now if the procedures that we've developed work so well? It's because that's what we pay for. That's the they, that's the story that we are in position, sort of inevitably, that we have been in a position to respond to. That is not the story that we should be telling. We need to tell a different story about what we do in order to make this change happen. Because there is already a story that's being told about us, and it is that the work we do is not valuable. It doesn't have value because its value is determined by how its cost is estimated. Does that make sense? And it's cheap. Most of what we do is talk. Most of what we do is engage in relationships with people that involve the sort of most core vulnerability in who we are, of who we are. That is cheap. That is why peer support provision is so inexpensive, right? Because all it involves is talking and being in a relationship. It involves the sort of most basic kind of human aspects of what we are. That's not expensive, that's cheap. And so that's how it is reimbursed. That's how it is valued. What we need to do is demand that the way, and this is our story, the way healthcare gets paid for, I've only got 30 seconds, the way healthcare gets paid for needs to be thought about totally differently. And this is our opportunity to do that. We need to value and have paid for the relational work that we do. Right now, we have no way of calculating that because payment happens through procedure. It doesn't happen through understanding over long trajectories of the impacts of relationship. Treatment is effective. Is it impactful? So we need to really, my time is up, we need to really dig into this as bureaucrats, as administrators. This is not about oratory. This is about calculating value and telling a story that will motivate a different kind of value calculation. And the change can be radical. I'll stop in 1 second. I used to work in New York City. I've told many of you this story. And when I got to New York, peer support providers were paid through the Medicaid system in New York $11 an hour for face-to-face time, right? This was in 2016, maybe. No, I'm so sorry. A little earlier, 2015. $11 an hour, which I think to a lot of people felt intuitively commensurate with the value of that work and the expectations for how it is that we should compensate people with lived experience. Over the course of an episode of Medicaid reform in New York, and we are in such a moment right now, aren't we, in this state? That procedure reimbursement for peers was shifted from $11 to $55. And that happened because we were damned insistent that we tell the story about the value of that work, that it not be dictated to us through a lens colored by years and years of institutional marginalization, of siloing, stereotyping, racism, et cetera, et cetera. We had to own that story. And CMS, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid, listened to the story we told. And we executed that change in a very bureaucratic way. It can happen. The oratory needs to lead. But the technical execution of the change can absolutely happen if we take the charge that's been spoken in this room and tell our story before it's told about us. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bergman, for highlighting the county's commitment to address some of the challenges facing our behavioral health workforce today. Social finance has been a key partner in helping us think through the financing options and aspects of the Workforce Training Fund. Jake Siegel, Vice President at Social Finance, is here today to discuss this recommendation in more detail and provide a view on how these funds are coming together in other industries and other parts of the country. Welcome, Jake.
Well, I am neither a poet nor a bureaucrat. I am a dyed-in-the-wool nerd, and thankfully 10 years older than that picture. I want to say, we are in an interesting moment now, in that I go around the country and I hear a lot about the future of work. Right? And people talk about automation and artificial intelligence, and at the same time, year after year, we seem to be failing on the whole at something right in front of our faces today, which is getting enough people trained for the jobs in the economy today. Right? And this seems like such a simple thing, right? But underneath all of that seeming simplicity is this kind of deep complexity of life, right? Of getting the scholarships and the loans to get into a training program, of fixing a broken car in order to make it to class on time, and juggling part-time work with school in order to make ends meet and make rent. And so we have this persistent mismatch between what businesses and other employers in the economy need and what they find in the workforce. And this mismatch, as the kind of economy changes and evolves and accelerates and mutates, that mismatch is becoming one of the great challenges of the 21st century. You've heard a lot already about this report, the $128 million regional training fund. And that training fund is actually intended to squarely kind of counteract some of those challenges. And it does so with a bunch of different tools. Everything from things you might know a lot about: scholarships, stipends, loan forgiveness. Somehow I have a lot of, hold on, I'm gonna move this. And it also does something else, which is a revolving loan fund, a kind of renewable learning fund. And I want to spend the next 5 minutes talking about this idea. It is not the biggest idea in the report. It's not even the biggest idea in the training fund, but I think it's an interesting and an important one, right? In that it adds rungs to the ladder of economic mobility. And it also takes seriously this idea that we need to maximize the impact of every public and philanthropic training dollar that we have at our disposal. Stepping back just a second, I work at an organization called Social Finance. We are a nonprofit, and we are just obsessed with outcomes. We work with communities and with governments around the country to build outcomes-based funding models and use kind of outcomes-based thinking to solve challenges. And these days, I spend a lot of my time thinking about economic mobility. Now, the roots of economic immobility are deep and long-standing, and they're rooted in kind of histories of inequality, of wealth and power and access. But one part of that equation that we don't talk a lot about is risk. I said I was a nerd, and I'll prove it true. For all of the jobs that are out there, for most folks, post-secondary career training is incredibly risky. They have to downshift the jobs that they're working in today, take out loans, and bet it all that a training program will actually help them get into a better paying job, that a degree or a credential with shifting or uncertain value will pay off in the context of an economy and a nation in which your odds of making more money than your parents have become a coin flip. Right? In a world in which on-the-job training is on the decline, in which government-funded training programs as a percentage of the overall training budget have declined year over year for a generation. And so we've essentially centralized or consolidated all of the risks involved in workforce training and put them on the shoulders of students. So it's not a big surprise that we don't have all of the skills that we need in the economy today. we think at social finance a lot about how to reallocate some of those risks. On the one hand, we want to radically improve access to the best training programs for folks that face barriers to training, especially low-income people, and make sure that they can get into programs that set them up well for higher paying jobs. But we also know that access isn't going to cut it on its own. Right? Getting in the door is a start, but you also need to be able to get through training programs and get into good jobs thereafter. And so the work that we do focuses a lot on those kind of wraparound supports and stipends required to succeed and get into jobs. And we also think that repayment should be linked to performance, right? So actually, your ability to get a good job should dictate how much you ultimately pay for a training program. And so to power these kinds of ideas, we've been working with communities around the country and trying to build workforce funds. And these are all a little bit different, and they're all kind of focused on whatever is most important within the local economy, but all of them share some principles. All of them are focused on access, and particularly access for marginalized communities. They all care quite a lot about the supportive services people need to be successful within programs. And they all kind of link repayment to ultimate career outcomes, to earnings, and try to find mechanisms for forgiving debt, forgiving repayment if folks aren't successful at getting into higher paying jobs. And all of this is with the intention of trying to extend and stretch all of the training money that we have out there such that we can pay it forward for future students if they are successful at getting into good jobs. This is a kind of a fun moment to be talking about this for me, in that just last week, we launched our first kind of pilot state-level Pay It Forward fund alongside Governor Murphy in New Jersey. We have a logo and everything. And I just want to highlight this as just an example of how something like this can work. So we worked with the state of New Jersey for the last year to put this thing together, and it brings together about $7.5 million from the state of New Jersey alongside $5 million from some of its largest employers. These are folks like J&J and Verizon and Prudential. And we aggregated all of that into a training fund and went out to try to find some of the best training providers within the state, those that were aligned with the state's own kind of policy interests in things like green energy and healthcare and IT, but also, and more importantly, those that had a track record of significant earnings gains for low-income New Jerseyans. And then for folks that were interested in those training programs and that were eligible, they would get access to a zero interest, zero fee, outcomes-based loan, plus a stipend, so a monthly stipend of about $500 a month, and significant wraparound supports, in this case, access to things like an emergency loan fund if the car does break down, or mental health counseling, relevant to this audience, and career coaching and other things like that. Folks only pay those outcomes-based loans back if they're successful at getting into significantly better paying jobs. And they have to make above a minimum income threshold. So for a family of three, that's about $45,000 in New Jersey. For a family of four, it's about $55,000 before they start repaying it all. For most folks, it's an average of about $100 a month. And what's interesting about this is that they never pay above the face value of the loan. If their wages ever drop below that minimum income threshold, they stop paying. And at the end of 5 years, any outstanding debt that's in good standing is forgiven. So in New Jersey, which, like California, is a state with significant supports for folks to get into training, this is significantly preferential to other kind of options that most students have. And at the same time, it gives real downside protection if things don't turn out the way that the people had hoped. In New Jersey, I forgot to show you this beautiful slide. In New Jersey, the eligibility for a program like this is focused on low-income New Jerseyans, veterans, and folks with significant interactions with the criminal justice system. One thing that isn't involved in eligibility is credit scores, right? With the thinking that potential is a forward-facing kind of thing rather than a backward-facing one. So I think there's an opportunity to bring a version of something like this to San Diego. Thank you. And kind of orient it toward the behavioral health ecosystem. Of course, it isn't equally well suited to every career track out there. For some careers, actually, today's student loans are okay. They're imperfect, and there are other ways in which we can help support them, but they're okay. And for others that are, making below a minimum income threshold, we don't need any more debt burden, even if it is good debt. What we need is more kind of grants and scholarships. But for others, this is a really promising avenue and actually holds a lot of opportunity to help folks get into good training programs and succeed through them and get into good jobs. For folks like, licensed clinical social workers and LMFTs, and for others like psychiatric mental health nurse practitioners, this could offer new kind of openings, new kind of doorways to get into good training programs. And if we design it and build it well, we can build a fund that, alongside stipends and other kind of wraparound supports, can replenish itself and kind of stretch the value of our training funds. Now, the Workforce Partnership, thankfully, has some experience in building these kind of ultra student-friendly funding models. They have the Income Share Agreement Fund already, but there's still a lot more to be done. And if San Diego does bring this kind of a model to the county, it can be the first in the nation to orient this kind of a revolving fund toward what is realistically the nation's fastest growing and probably most important workforce challenge. Right? It kind of brings a regional approach, one that is embedded in accountability and that uses both kind of financial and also impact tracking to help orient how we're spending money and reads out on those things on a really regular basis back to the community. And as others have alluded to, this can be a model for the rest of the state and also for folks around the country. I know that we're in very early stages of these conversations, but others are already watching. So I'm excited about this idea. I think, it offers last beautiful slide. It offers a sustainable and really kind of worker-centric, student-centric mechanism for helping to try to achieve the incredibly ambitious goals set out in the report. For the public sector and for philanthropy, this helps to achieve policy goals while also, maximizing the value of all of our training funds. For training providers themselves, it provides a kind of flexible source of growth capital to help serve more students. And for students, it opens the door to great training while also providing good downside protection. For employers, this is a regular pipeline of diverse talent that they can tap into and help to expand services. So this is kind of the promise of the Renewable Learning Fund idea embedded within the report. Thanks for having me, and looking forward to seeing you at the break.
Thank you, Jake, for providing your important perspective on the outcomes-based loan and renewable learning funds. I would now like to invite our first panel on stage. Andy Hall, former Workforce Partnership executive turned consultant, who helped bring this whole project together, will moderate our panel focusing on establishing regional training centers of excellence. Welcome, Andy.
We're going to share my. Hi, everybody. It's really good to be here, and like everyone else has said, see some people in person after just seeing a face. So we talked about the need. Daniel and Karen unpacked the worker shortage. We heard from several folks about the kind of real human side of the behavioral health shortage. We talked about compensation, a little bit about documentation, and then we just heard about affordability and access in the student finance system. And so in the behavioral health space, there's kind of one more critical element to talk about to increase the number of folks who have the required licensure to serve patients in San Diego, and that's internships and supervision hours, a critical piece of the behavioral health pipeline. In the recommendation, or in the report, one of the recommendations is to establish regional training centers of excellence to develop core competencies in expanding training and supervision slots for behavioral health students and workers. And to help me unpack this recommendation is you come on up to the stage, Dr. Moises Barón, President and CEO of the San Diego Center for Children. and Dr. Rachel Hain-Schlegel, Interim Associate Dean of Research at San Diego State University's College of Education and Associate Professor of the Department of Child and Family Development. So welcome them to the stage. All right, I'm going to give this to you, Moises. All right, glad you're here. This is our first panel. We've kind of gone with the TEDx vibe, and so this will be a chance for some people to ask some questions. We should have time for that. So first, Moises, can you describe what a regional training center of excellence would be, and really just fundamentally, what's the problem it would solve?
Absolutely, and good morning. Happy to be here. So when we started this work, we reached out to our colleagues in academia and asked the question, okay, we want to be able to have more students, more graduates in the pipeline to be able to increase our workforce. What are some of the obstacles you see? And I was thinking that I would hear things like more faculty release time, scholarships, all of those are important. But much to my surprise is like the lack of quality training sites came up as number one for most of them. We talked with colleagues at the State, UST, and other organizations that we talked to. And to help us understand why this is such an important problem and it could create a significant bottleneck if we don't address it, we need to look at what is required for professionals in our field to be able to get the training that is required to become licensed eventually or credentialed, whatever may be the case. So we need to have more students, diverse students, enroll in community colleges and universities. Yes, we need that, and we need to be purposeful about that. We need to provide them with the support to be successful. And we need to be able to support the programs that we have in the region, which do fantastic work to be able to really help us bring students, train them so that they can be ready to provide the service that we need in the community. But there's a very important component that a lot of people don't think about or miss, and that is that in most of the professions in mental health, you require training opportunities while you are a student, for which there is no reimbursement. And then also, and that could be hundreds of hours, that could happen at a master level, PhD, or other levels. And then also, you require a practicum or associate side training opportunity after you graduate. That is to be able to collect the thousands of hours that you need to be able to sit down for licensure. And to be honest with you, today we have a very disorganized system to provide this type of training. In mental health, it hasn't been well put together, organized like in other professions. And what happens also today is that you can have different programs, different universities competing for the training sites, and even programs within a university like San Diego State can be competing for these same sites. It doesn't make any sense. So one of the things I appreciate about the opportunity to work with my colleagues in this task force was to be able to think out of the box and say, what can we do different rather than just repeating the same? So we came up with the idea of trying to develop regional training hubs of excellence. And let me describe what this can look like. So the way we conceptualize it, it's not working.
I'll advance it. All right, you got it.
There we go.
I got you.
Okay, the old-fashioned way.
There we go. I'll track you.
Okay, very good. So we believe that we might be able to do something different if we create a true partnership between the county, workforce partnership, educational institutions, and community-based organizations that are frequently the sites where this training takes place. But we all are separate today. We are not coming together to identify how we can do this better and together. And we believe that these training centers of excellence can have 4 functions that could really help address a lot of the challenges that we're experiencing. On the one hand, we might be able to identify where we have shortages or underserved communities, underserved services, and be able to use these training sites as a means to be able to bring services to where they're not delivered or to populations that are underserved. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about it. On the other hand, we can create a more robust, interdisciplinary, purposeful training set of programs where we can bring people together to be exposed to a range of different services that are being provided in the community, but also to different disciplines within the field. We can also develop technical assistance to be able to help others develop these opportunities and research. So when we're talking about behavioral health services, how about if we were to identify areas where we have a need and be able to locate some of these services, or maybe they already exist, to be able to address the needs of populations that are not getting access to care. We talked about it today. Many of those needing care are not getting it. So how we can be more purposeful to use some of these training sites to be able to access that level of care and leverage funding that may be available to be able to do that. On the other hand, we believe that it would be better if we have a better organized system that identifies the training sites that we have available in the community and bring them to meet together. It could be at the regional level, or it could be based on the population we want to serve. For example, being San Diego Center for Children, I'm obviously interested in pediatric mental health. So how can we do this better? How we can come together to be able to identify what are the opportunities and the supports that are needed to be able to provide the appropriate level of training and supervision. And it really could be multidisciplinary because we need to look at the needs of all these professions and all these disciplines. When it comes to technical assistance, we're talking about helping more CBOs, or CBOs that are already doing it or would like to do it, understand what they need to have in place to be able to provide these training opportunities so that they can develop more services. And also, maybe identify CBOs in underserved communities that have a presence and credibility and may be interested in being a site where some of these services can be provided and they can become satellites for these hubs. We could provide assistance with supervision and regional convenings to come together to create something that doesn't exist yet. And last but not least, and my colleague Rachel will be talking about it, is to provide opportunities for research. There is a disconnect that exists today between the classroom and what happens in the training sites. So we can bridge that disconnect, start doing some research to identify what are the best practices, how we can really address them better, and what are the better outcomes, and also do work optimization. Be able to identify what kind of professions or occupations may be better able to respond to needs of different communities and how we might be able to do this together.
Thanks, Moises. And Rachel, a simple question, I guess, after hearing that overview. Would that help you? And why? And I should qualify that a little bit. Would that help you increase slots and help address the worker shortage that we heard about this morning?
Well, short answer is yes, but before I answer the question, I do want to say that, I just want to acknowledge everyone in the room that not only is providing services to the people in the community that need them, but also is providing the training experiences to our students and trainees who desperately need those on-the-job training opportunities to really learn how to provide effective, meaningful services. So thank you all of you that do that, because as Moises said, it's not reimbursable. There's lots of extra hours that come with having trainees in your site. And so on behalf of all of the training programs in the region, I want to thank everybody for the work that you do, not just to support clients, but also to support trainees. So will this help? Yes, this absolutely will help. As Moises said, there's a really big lack of coordination across programs within SDSU, for example, as well as across universities around the training opportunities that are available for students. There is also one of the things I wanted to mention that I think will become very helpful once this gets going is that there aren't a lot of supervisors. Where there's a lack of providers and there's a lack of supervisors, and so the entire system is bottlenecked, not just the provider level of the system. So, getting more people trained with high quality supervision is going to allow for those people to then hopefully stay and become supervisors and supervise more trainees to really increase that workforce. So getting folks in the door, getting folks into programs. I loved the last presentation about innovative ways to recruit and help fund opportunities for really diverse people to come into this workforce. We also really need supervisors to stay. And I could say more, but I have a feeling we're running low on time, so I'll let you go to the next question.
We'll keep it going. The next question is back to you. One of the circles up there is research opportunities, and you're also, in addition to your associate professor role at SDSU, you're also the Dean of Research at SDSU's College of Education. talk about any interesting research and partnership opportunities you see for SDSU and maybe universities more generally if this Center of Excellence concept got off the ground.
Sure. So there's a lot of different opportunities here. I think that first of all, the opportunity, this is a one-of-a-kind report. These hubs are kind of a brand new idea being proposed. And being able to study whether, in a systematic way, whether these kinds of coordinated training efforts. And also, one thing that neither Moises nor I have said yet, and I was going to be the second part of my answer, but, well, you touched on it, but really across professions, across disciplines, across nursing, across social work, across marriage and family therapy, across psychology. Getting students together to sort of demystify what the other professions do, what the languages are that they use, is really going to increase the quality of the workforce and the workforce delivery of services. So studying this process to see if it has the outcomes that we hope it will have is going to be critical, and that's where certainly university faculty can play a role. I would also say that being able to SDSU already has very strong partnerships with many, many community organizations. We're really grateful for our community partners. And we can do more to be partnering with community agencies. We can be doing more to do research that is really going to inform and help the challenges that they're facing. And we also, by having closer partnerships, this is venturing off of research slightly, but closer partnerships will help inform what our training programs are doing. We can tailor and pivot to what the needs are of the organizations.
That's great. And I think, thank you for that, Rachel. And Moises, this question's for you. And then Rachel, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this too. Ambitious but not illusionary with this report is kind of the theme that we talked about this morning. Where would this go terribly wrong? And or what other challenge do you see in implementing this recommendation?
Well, I think that what we have today is what's terribly wrong, and we need to do something to change it, because otherwise we're going to continue to perpetuate the same problems, and we've been talking about it today. We cannot expect different outcomes if we're going to keep doing the same. So that's, I think, one important component. I think that San Diego is uniquely posed to be able to do that, because we do have the relationships, we have the leadership that may allow us to really come together to be able to think about it in a different way. Most to my surprise, as we were doing research on this, we couldn't find a model out there, because we were thinking, okay, maybe there's something out there that we can look at and try to replicate. We couldn't find anything that is as comprehensive as this in the state or in the nation. It may be there, but we couldn't find it. So I think that we are uniquely posed to be able to do that. There's definitely obstacles, there always are, but I think that they're surmountable if we come together to be able to use the resources, the know-how, to be able to identify how to integrate this and how to do it in a better way. And we require it, because if not, we're going to create a bottleneck that all of the other elements of the plan are just not going to work if we don't solve this problem.
That's great. And Rachel, any perspectives on that question coming from the university side?
Sure. I mean, I think that competition is always challenging. And so even with more coordination, there's going to be, I was talking to a colleague who said that she actually was able to get her students placed earlier this year. She was able to switch her schedule around, and therefore there were less slots available in a different training program at our university that they typically get, because they were following their same time frame. And so just even small details like that, I think there's going to be a lot of work to do to really truly coordinate. I also think that, I'll stop there. I'll say that would be one potential challenge from the training program side that I see at this point.
Everyone wants to kind of still do their own thing, and internal competition across the region. How do we solve that? Good response. Okay, one more question for both of you, and then we'll have a few minutes, I think, for some Q&A. Moises, you mentioned there's not really a model that we would follow to do this. So what implications would this have for the broader field, both in San Diego, the state, and the country, if we're able to stand up these centers of excellence?
I think that this is something that's recognized as being badly needed, not only in San Diego, in the state, and in the nation, really. So I think that we have an opportunity here to create something that will be a model that could be recreated elsewhere. I think that San Diego is uniquely posed, as I said before, to be able to pilot something like this and to be able to identify how this could look like. Actually, we had an opportunity with our colleagues at San Diego State to really take it a step further and envision what this would look like. We went to identifying the steps, we went to identifying what something like this would look like, and I think by all this coming together, we might be able to really create something very unique.
Thank you. Do we have some time for questions? I'll check. That's great, on schedule as usual for the San Diego Workforce Partnership. We do have some questions. Okay, I see one over here. Go ahead, sir. We don't have mics running at the moment, so we'll hear you though if you speak loud.
Yeah, if you could just unpack the technical assistance box that you have out there, and that would be very helpful.
Yeah, I think Moises, I'll give that one to you.
Sure. There are a couple.
Sorry, the question was for the room, if we could talk more about the technical assistance box of the 4 components of the Center of Excellence model. So Moises, go ahead.
You know, this idea came from the fact that we have close to 20 to 25 trainees, associates, practicum students, multidisciplinary at every given time. And I receive calls on a regular basis from organizations that are interested in potentially develop programs, not knowing exactly where to go to be able to understand the know-how. What are the steps to take? What do you need to have in place, et cetera, et cetera. So one important component would be that the regional centers could be the place where people can go, where CBOs could go, others could go to be able to understand how to do it, be able to understand best practices. And another idea that we were toying with is that if we identify underserved communities, where maybe we have CBOs, like I mentioned before, that have credibility already in place, but they are providing a different type of service. But we know that mental health is really needed there. Rather than having people come to us or try to build a new center or clinic or whatever may be the case, what about the possibility of bringing the services through that partnership and be able to provide the know-how, the support, or it could be that one of those CBOs could serve as a satellite to this center of excellence to be able to understand how to be able to provide the services. Interns could rotate. So there's a lot of possibilities in terms of how we can not only provide the care that's needed, help more people, more organizations learn how to be able to do it and participate in the process, but also how to bring services where they are not provided today.
Thanks for that, Moises. We have a question right here. Hi, Rosanna. Good to see you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you. Rosana Rosada Harmonian. I like the model and I like the approach. And while you're not talking about specifics, I think it's important to put in advocacy for ensuring that these training hubs or training centers are inclusive of early childhood developmental stages and across the lifespan of trauma-informed practices and of culturally responsive trainings. And I know there's a lot of conversation about that. I'm still not seeing it as a clinician embedded in the academic side and really implemented in the day-to-day practice. So I just want to make sure that always stays at the forefront of the planning. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments on that?
Good seeing you, and thank you for bringing that point. I think that one of the things that could be unique about this is like when we think about devising these training centers of excellence, we can think about regions, we can think about populations, and be able to identify the kind of expertise that will be needed to be able to be responsive exactly to what you're talking about, and we need to keep these principles in mind. So there is great opportunity for doing, and I appreciate you mentioning that, because that should be embedded in the work that we do.
I know we're between a quick break, and everyone could probably use that. Unless I don't see any other burning questions, I'm going to give us a few minutes back, unless Moises or Rachel, you had a last word you wanted to leave the group with.
Well, I will add to the comment Moises had about the trauma-informed care, focusing on early childhood through the lifespan. I think that one of the potential real strengths of having something that's collaborative across programs, across universities, across CBOs, across disciplines, is that the programs that maybe are excelling in some of those areas can start to have an impact on the other programs in a way, sort of an organic way that might move forward the missions, the really important missions that you provide, that you listed, that have not trickled down completely yet to the workforce. So I think there's strength in exposure to different ways of providing services and different ways of developing a training curriculum. Not going to get everybody to do the same thing, and we don't necessarily want that to be the case. But I think of one training program, for example, at SDSU that is focused on a lot of the things that you talked about in early childhood and trauma-informed care. And maybe having them at the table with a lot of other programs might get other programs thinking about that kind of training. So I just wanted to kind of respond to that as well.
Great. Moises, last word.
Yeah, the last thing I wanted to mention is that I've been a psychologist for way too long, 34 years or so. I was trying to do the math in my head. I have to say that now in the present, I feel the most hopeful I have felt about the possibility for change, for people to really truly understand what the importance of our field, the value that it brings to people's lives, and the importance that it has to be able to receive the attention and the support that it's needed. So I really want to acknowledge and appreciate the leadership of Supervisor Fletcher, Chairman of the Board of Supervisors, Luke also, Bergman, and all those people that came together to the table to help us really think this through, not have any preconceived ideas, be able to speak truth to power, and be able to say what needed to be said so that we can really think about some solutions. So I would say that today I feel more of a sense of hope, and I hope that we can really use this to kindle that same feeling in not only our community but in all others throughout the state.
Thank you for that. Let's give a hand to Moises and Rachel. And I'll turn it back over to Farina.
Thank you, Dr. Barone and Dr. Haynes-Schlegel, for sharing your insights. And now we will break until about 10:15. Please take a moment to talk with your neighbors, what brought you to the symposium today, and we'll see you in a bit. All right. Welcome back, everyone. I'd like to invite County Supervisor Tara Lawson-Riemer, who also chairs our Workforce Development Policy Board, to share her views on how the county can play an important role in addressing the worker shortage challenge. Welcome, Supervisor.
Thank you so much. First of all, thank you all for coming back to from the break so quickly. I think it shows the eagerness that you all bring to tackling these challenges. And I share that eagerness. I first just want to say how impressed I am with the presentations this morning and all the work that's gone into this report and all the thoughtfulness and creativity that has been brought to bear in tackling this incredibly pressing challenge for our region. As a person who spent much of my life doing reports, doing data-driven policy making, really having my own hands in the weeds in this kind of analysis, the level of detail, the specificity, the fact that this report mentions real numbers, that we know exactly how many workers we're going to be short in each field, in each area, today, tomorrow, and 10 years from now, is exactly the kind of analysis that we needed to begin the hard work of tackling this challenge in San Diego County and in our region. I just want to share to begin a couple of my key takeaways and things that I really thought were so important from this morning, and then begin the conversation about how we can come together to tackle this problem. Because this report is a great first step, but I know that Chair Fletcher did not intend for a report to sit in a dustbin. He intended for a report to be the catalyst and the driver for action. And as our incoming chair, our new chair of the San Diego Workforce Partnership, I am equally committed to ensuring that these recommendations become real, that this is something that becomes a roadmap for us to do work in the next 1 year, 3 year, 5 years, so that 5 years, 10 years from now, people come from all over the country to have jobs and to get trained in mental and behavioral health, because we become a beacon for how to do this right across our country. I want to thank the 1,600 workers and students that informed the report, and the Workforce Partnership leaders, including Andy Hall, Karen Boyd, Daniel Enemark, and Karen Conley. Obviously, the entire Workforce Steering Committee, you got a huge round of applause this morning, and I just want to echo my thanks as well. And then the staff that has put together this symposium and is there day in and day out, making sure the work moves forward. So thank you all so much for your efforts and for your dedication to this. So this morning, there's a lot there. I think a lot of really interesting highlights. But a couple of the things that really stood out to me was one, the fact that there are recommendations in this report that allow us to build on a lot of the strengths we have as a region. That we have universities, we have community colleges, we have so many good partners here in San Diego County, and we have a San Diego County that is committed to making change. And so the recommendations this morning put forward a vision for training and training centers that speak to the comparative advantages that we have in this region. The second thing I wanted to take away from this morning is that it's going to take work, it's going to take commitment, it's going to take resources. And I know that as a supervisor here in San Diego County with the privilege of serving with Chair Fletcher and my other colleague, Vice Chair Nora Vargas, I know we are committed to taking action on the recommendations that are outlined in this report directed at the county. And we are going to be doing our part as quickly as possible as a county to begin to move forward these recommendations. But we also need to come together as a public-private partnership to raise the resources, to put together the funding, to put together the leadership team to begin to implement these training centers, to begin to implement these stipend programs, to begin to implement these scholarship programs, because this is not a problem that's going to solve itself. We have great analysis, and now we have a roadmap to action. I think a lot of times when we talk about workforce, it does become a little bit overwhelming. It feels so systemic. When we know that we need 18,500 more workers in this field just by 2027, that can feel really daunting. Because we know it's going to require us all working together to reach that goal. But what we cannot forget is that the core of our mental and behavioral workforce challenge is human suffering. It's people who are in need in our community, who need help, who need support, who are in crisis, and who cannot get the help that they need, who cannot get the support that they need, leading to huge burdens, huge strains, not only on individuals, but on families and communities. And with many of these people ending up homeless, on the streets, committing suicide, really in crisis. And we know that we can prevent these problems. These are preventable problems. Our country is not doing what we could do, is not doing a good enough job, is not doing what we know is possible. So I think this report outlines for us what we are kind of knew already, right? That it is possible. It is possible. It is practical. It is doable to come together to address our behavioral and mental health workforce challenges and ensure that people in our community get the services they need. Now we have that roadmap. Now we have that analysis. Now we have that data. So it's really going to be up to us to organize ourselves, to bring together the resources and the commitment to translate this really extraordinary roadmap and analysis into action. So thank you again, everyone, for being here. I am looking forward to taking the baton from Chair Fletcher and working to translate a lot of this into action. Thank you again, Chair Fletcher, for getting the ball moving on this incredibly important endeavor. And thank you all for all of your work.
Thank you, Supervisor. We now have a panel focused on registered apprenticeships in the behavioral health space. Karen Connolly, Director of Workforce Development in Healthcare at the Workforce Partnership, and a key contributor to the programmatic recommendations in the report, having already piloted some of them through funding and support from the J.P. Morgan Chase Foundation, will moderate our panel. Welcome, Karen.
Hi, all. Thanks for joining us. I'm super excited to have really awesome, phenomenal women up here with me. So we have Joy Hermsen, Director of Innovative Partnerships at Futuro Health, Marissa Varand, the Executive Director of the Kallstrom Institute, and Colleen La Fuente from our Regional Community Colleges Systems. Today we're going to talk about apprenticeships.
When my family moved here from Italy, my dad was in the Navy, and my first American home was in Chula Vista. So it's like coming home. But I just want to say this. San Diego is light years ahead of anyone else in the country for solving this problem. So I'd like to acknowledge Chair Fletcher, Chair Lawson-Riemer, Peter Kallstrom, everyone at San Diego Workforce, everyone doing all the work. This is it. It's like the moment we've all been waiting for and training for. And I say this because I used to train people to do triathlons, right? And so, you know, the Ironman is it, right? 2.4 ocean swim, 2.4 miles, 116 miles on a bike, then do a marathon. And as Chair Fletcher's saying, we're just warming up, kids. So I hope look, we've already got, Marissa and I have our sleeves rolled up. We are ready. So this thing we're going to talk about is this thing that Karen's envisioned.
So today we're going to talk about apprenticeships, and you all may be wondering what the heck is an apprenticeship. So we're going to have Joy talk to us a little bit more about what is an apprenticeship and why do we keep hearing about apprenticeships.
I also just wanted to note that because we haven't figured out yet what it is, it's like when we learn to drive. Anyone here ever taught a teenager how to drive? Remember being a teenager? I drove on a stick shift. I live now in San Francisco, not a place easy to drive, a stick shift, but remember how hard it seemed? And then now you're driving. Remember the first storm you ever drove at night on a long road trip? And now what are you doing? You're not even driving, you're driving with your knee, you're like, you're drinking your coffee. So apprenticeship is just like that. Seems complicated, is not. Is not. We can figure it out here. And so we need 4 key things for an apprenticeship. These are DAS-approved slides. So we have actually representatives from the DOL and the DAS here because in California we have a dual enrollment apprenticeship. I've already lost you, I know. 4 things we need, and we have them here. We need a program that an employer will sponsor. We need an LEA, so college or training facility. We need people who want to do it, the apprentice, and we need registration to be able to have that available in our state. California, again, has a special dual apprentice approval thing. Never mind that. The next slide I wanted to show you, though, Karen, is what the heck is Futuro Health involved? Where are they in that? So, can I just stand up for a second? Okay. We're this thing in the middle, right? So if these are all the dots, and these are all the stakeholders, everyone's here in the room, we're not even going to tell you what an apprenticeship is. We're going to tell you about a pilot we're going to do to support this report, but also some other things that San Diego's doing that you might not even know about that really is why I'm so excited about what we're doing. So Futuro Health is a nonprofit. It's about 2 years old, and our mission is to grow the health and wealth of communities by building allied healthcare workforce, the biggest one in the nation. I say that because I can say that Futuro Health is dedicated to building the health and wealth of San Diego communities by working on training and employing the biggest workforce in behavioral health in this region right here to be a model for the state and the country. We are working on a pilot we'll talk about in detail here in a little bit that involves substance use disorder. What? Apprenticeship is for construction. It's for culinary. Here it is in behavioral health with a possibility it's actually happening. Futuro Health is actually using this. We're looking at multiple initiatives in the state, peer support specialists, behavioral health, community health workers, all these places where a learn and earn model already exists. We haven't done a good job of telling employers the ROI. We also haven't made it easy for people to understand the benefit. These are pre-baccalaureate degrees that get people into the pipeline. So as you saw the workforce data that Daniel and it's in the report, there are all these roles, there's a pipeline. If we need more LCSWs, they're just gonna magically appear like, boing. No, we have to fill with people who are starting. Peer support specialists, great place to start. Community health worker, great place to start. And you get more money and more credibility with apprenticeship as a credential, can be led to an AA, can lead to a BA, can lead to a master's, can get us the people we need. And all of it means you can work while you're learning. It's not sequential. That's right. Play the music. That's right. So Nate said, the life you live is the legacy you leave. And I will just say the workforce development choices we make that we live in San Diego is the behavioral health legacy we can leave. I think that's all I really need to say. Also, there's federal and state supporting of this, right? And just in other countries like the UK, like the Netherlands, apprenticeship is important. The governor knows this is important. We know this is important as a country, but we have no models for it at all. So there's incentive to be innovative, to bring diversity into apprenticeship and into this workforce. Everything we've talked about. I'm sorry, my name's Joy, so there's a little pressure. But and Moises said hope. So I will say I feel like we've been training for this moment. We're about to start this Ironman, and we're gonna kill it. It's gonna be awesome, and we're gonna be having so much fun. But it really is partly because of the energy and the dedication of all of you believing in this shared vision. I'm humbled and honored to be part of the work with you.
Thank you, Joy. And now, before I hand this over to Marissa, I think, so we're announcing it here first that the Workforce Partnership and McAllister Institute will be launching the first of its kind substance use disorder counselor apprenticeship in the state. There's currently not a single of this type in the state. There are very few in the country. I think we just kind of didn't beat somebody else to the punch. I think there may only be a handful in the country. But on that note, I want to hear from Marissa about why McAllister really jumped at this opportunity and what they're hoping to see from this and why they're all in.
Well, I certainly would have worn different shoes if I knew we were doing a triathlon. But I will start by saying that maybe the most controversial thing, which is that money alone cannot fix this problem. And I think we saw in 2018 when the Drug Medi-Cal Organized Delivery System launched that an increased investment does not suddenly increase the workforce and the folks that you have to hire. I also think that we have been an organization who has been very dedicated to meeting the folks that we serve where they are. But what we've had to do more recently is to take a look at where our staff is. How are they doing? How are they faring? And the really hard truth is that they are facing the same social determinants of health that are barriers for the people that we serve: childcare, transportation, gas costs. And if we really want to meet our workers where they are, then we need to look at what we can do as an organization to support them and not just say, come in, figure it out, and somehow get to this certificate, to this license, to whatever the career path is. And it's a little bit embarrassing to think that our workforce has gone so long and that we as an organization have left the challenging process of navigating employment, of education, of balancing that with life to our workforce to figure out, and to not be putting resources behind it, to not be investing. And so really our hats go off to San Diego Workforce Partnership, not just for this conference, but for this opportunity. They have been so wonderful in holding our hand because in some ways it feels too good to be true that we could actually support our employees in education, in books, in transportation, in mentorship. The mentorship component is something that we see as a way to give back to our employees, but also to really address these issues of health disparities, of the fact that our workforce does not always look like the people that we serve. And in order to do that, we really need to create a pipeline that someone who is completing their program in a program of recovery can see very clearly spelled out for them how they can take the step into really giving back in a way that will pay them for that career. And that means that we need to go all the way back to record expungement, that we need to support our folks in getting the soft skills of even knowing what it is to be in an employment and accountability. And then we also need to help them with the education. and the books. And we need to have someone who's in our organization who is not just their supervisor, but who's their peer and can tell them that there will be tough times in the workplace, that there are challenges that they'll have to navigate and how they themselves have been through it. And because so many folks that we serve and that are also part of our workforce have lived experience, we already know how to do one addict helping another. And so to apply this into a workforce context is just an opportunity beyond our wildest dreams.
Thank you, Marissa. They've been an amazing partner. So we will be piloting the apprenticeship with them, but of course the plan is to add more employers. So please, if it's something you're interested in, please get in contact with me, let us know, because right now we're starting with Kallstrom, but really our hope is to make this, countywide for any employers who are looking for a way to do more for their staff. And then Connie, I think if you can add in, kind of that missing piece is what does the education look like in this learn and earn model?
Yeah, thank you, Karen. Thank you, everyone. Hello, my name is Colleen La Fuente, and I work for the community colleges here in San Diego County. And I'm just very pleased to be here and be part of this panel. So apprenticeships is a priority for our chancellor's office. And actually, apprenticeships is not new to the community colleges. In fact, community colleges oversee over 92,000 apprenticeships and 146 pre-apprenticeships, and we graduate 8,000 apprentices every year. So in 2020, the apprenticeship model was usually very traditional. So it was primarily for the building and manufacturing sector, but in 2020 it was expanded to cover healthcare. So since then, across this state, we have 36 allied health and nursing apprenticeships, and now we have 37. Yay! Yeah, thank you so much, Marisa. And so community colleges are well positioned to become that LEA, which is the Learning Educational Agency, and to be able to provide pre-apprenticeships or apprenticeships. The difference between a pre-apprenticeship is that the student is receiving education specifically for that occupation in which they will go and lead for the apprenticeship program. And an apprenticeship is that earn and earn model that the apprentice is actually learning as they earn, and which is providing a career path for either a college degree or a certificate. So in San Diego Imperial Region, we have 10 community colleges, and we serve over 200,000 students. And our students come from all walks of life. We have students that are the first time college graduate in their families to low income and students of color. So our students are the ones that are having to work part-time and sometimes even full-time, and that could delay the attainment of their certificate to be able to get these much-needed jobs. So this model of apprenticeship is a great answer for the population that which we serve. There are 3 roles that a community college can play, or the LEA is also known in an apprenticeship model. And one is as a training provider. As a training provider, we provide classroom education, and we work with the employer to develop a curriculum that will meet the specific skills that the apprentice needs to be able to fulfill that job. Then we have the intermediary role that a community college can play, and that is a full-blown coordination of the apprenticeship. That includes convening all the employers to the table and helping the employers develop a curriculum that will meet the industry standards for that particular occupation. And in some instances, some colleges actually also play the role of the sponsor, and that is pretty much they assume full responsibility of the administration and operation of the apprentice. I don't know if you want me to discuss what it takes to be into apprenticeship and the types of apprenticeship, or it's just
I think we can, a little bit more, because I think we still have a lot to understand about apprenticeship. But one point I do want to point out is once these are registered with the DOL and with the state, that education piece is covered. It's free. So we are talking no tuition, books, everything that would go into that education piece is covered. And the earn part is that these apprentices, they are employees of the organization they're working for. They're not interns. There are apprentices who are getting all of the benefits that come with being an employee for the entire time of their apprenticeship. So they're getting the wage, they're getting at least one wage increase throughout the time they're an apprentice. And ideally, they're getting hired on after their apprenticeship, and now this employer has this wonderful person to bring onto their team who has been trained exactly the way the employer wants them to be trained. So it's really, they're a benefit to everyone. And so I think these are the things we have to think about as we get creative in our strategies. So Connie, yeah.
Yes, thank you, Karen. So to have a registered pre-apprenticeship, you pretty much need 3 components. One is the education and training, which requires on-the-job education, which is approximately 2,000, it's not approximately, it's minimum of 2,000 hours on-the-job training. And then we have the education piece. The education part is 144 hours. It equates to almost a 1 year full-time in terms of that education piece. Then we need the related supplemental instruction, which is basically the curriculum that's developed in conjunction with the employer, and also the classes that might count towards a college degree. Then we need the on-the-job training, which is the sponsor, in this case, provides a plan to make sure that the apprentice is learning all those skill sets that they need to learn. And lastly, there needs to be a wage progression. So in the matter of 1 year that the apprentice is part of the program, there needs at least 1 wage increase. And there are 3 types of registered apprenticeships. One which is time-based, which is basically the monitoring of the time the apprentice has been on the job learning or also in the classroom environment. And there is the competency-based, which is the monitoring of the apprentice skill sets that the apprentice is learning to be able to fulfill those occupations. And that has to be a minimum of 6 months. In the space of the behavioral health programs with the community colleges, like I mentioned, we have 10 community colleges across the region. And most of our community colleges do have classes either for transfer, or we have short-term certificate programs. We have the community health worker program, the mental health work program, we have alcohol and other drug studies, and so on and so forth. So we do have these programs, and as McAllister today, I encourage you to come to the table with our community colleges and establish these conversations. We're also in conversations to start the Psych Tech program. We don't have one in San Diego, but we know that now by the report, it provides that labor market information that those programs are needed in our region. So we are in conversations to start a Psych Tech program and more to come. So we welcome you to the table to have these discussions about how we can partner. Employers are key into an apprenticeship model. You drive it. You are the ones hiring the apprentices. And we would love, as community colleges, to work with you to see how we can all come together and be part of this solution. Thank you.
Thank you, Connie. Joy, if you could talk real quickly about pre-apprenticeship and some of the work y'all are doing at Futuro to really help people get in and understand what the education piece might look like.
Thank you. So, okay, if you haven't already, you're super excited, right? Apprenticeship in San Diego, this is it. The pre-apprenticeship piece is really interesting because working with our K through 12 partners, there's a way to get people excited, interested, that career exploration. Can I see the possibility of how what the work I do actually leads to work that Dr. Bergman does or supports the work that everyone else in this room is doing? So the pre-apprenticeship piece is a really important health occupation exploration and kind of a motivation piece. One thing I wanted to mention too is actually Grossmont Health Occupation Center. Another place we can do some of this stuff is in that realm, an innovative piece we're starting to see, and I really have to give kudos to Abby Allen with the Department of Labor because she's helped connect the dots in so much of this apprenticeship work, and she's based in San Diego. But the thing I was going to say is, at the high schools, there aren't enough trained teachers, and there's a thing that teachers who want to train in this field have to pay for the privilege of teaching this thing. And so there's an apprenticeship initiative to remove that barrier, make being an instructor an apprenticeship in itself, and imagine, oh, wow, we unlocked that part, now we can train more people, get more people in a pre-apprenticeship, and then once they're in that apprenticeship pipeline, the apprenticeship piece that's ahead of them, whatever the pathway is in these pieces, become so much easier for them to get that employer success. I think from the employer side too, the ROI, you're getting to train folks that want to work with you, that you already have exposure to the culture on their side. As McAllister and Marissa's organization, we're starting with already employed folks. So the pilot will be real. It's not like there's any risk to the employer to take on new people yet. Just helping get that credential for the current folks is a way for us to step into the model. This was modeled, by the way, in another region in defense, and they started with an employer that said, okay, I'll give you 15 people, train them. After a year, they said, okay, we're good. We need 150 new people, please. And I think that's really what's going to happen here. So I really want to thank you for leading that.
Karen, may I add to that, please? So I just want to provide also as an example of a pre-apprenticeship. In Sac City, they decided to establish a pre-apprenticeship for the behavioral mental health program. And they started that program in May 2020. And classes are going to be classes are being open for enrollment in the fall of 2022, so as we speak. And the pre-apprenticeship they established was a partnership that they created with the K-12. And through that partnership with the K-12, high schools were able to provide those core basic competencies for that student to go into that apprenticeship once they graduated from high school. So what do those core competencies look like? There were probably motivational interviewing, social determinants of health, counseling. So those are the basic skills needed to go into the apprenticeship, because once you're in the apprenticeship, you are in the learn and earn model, so you're already in the workplace. So you have to have some of those essential skills. So that's a great also example for a pre-apprenticeship in creating that partnership with our K-12.
And I think we're just about at time. Does anybody have questions? I did want to open it up. I know that's a lot of information. And if anybody had a question about apprenticeship. Okay. Well, then we are super excited. We are hopefully sending our information to the DOL to get this registered within the next week. Next few weeks, we should be getting registered by the DOL, and then again, we'll send it over to the DAS, Department of Apprenticeship Standards, the state. We hope to have, I would say, a registered apprenticeship, I'm hoping by the end of the year, and then get moving on getting those enrollments up. So thank you all.
One more thing. Yeah. There is plenty of resources. The U.S. Department of Labor just this February 2022 released $112 million. And there's a lot of resources in terms of support at the community college level as well as other sources. So I just wanted to bring that up.
I'm going to take our last 10 seconds and say that, the beauty of this is that as an employer who already has over 400 staff, only 70 of them are actually certified SUD counselors. And so the training that is required by the county, that is required by educational institutions, all of the ingredients for the apprenticeship have already been here, and this is maybe the fact that it is about money and it is about support and structure, and so to bring all of those things together is just, again, an opportunity beyond our wildest dreams.
Thanks, ladies.
Such great information. Thank you, ladies. At the outset of our research into this topic, it became clear that many issues impacting the behavioral health worker shortage require policy action at the local, state, and federal level. We are pleased to now have Catherine Nacario, CEO of NAMI San Diego, here to share what a regional legislative platform could look like to support the region's efforts to attract and retain the estimated 18,500 additional workers needed by 2027. Welcome, Catherine.
Thank you so much. It is so just terrific to see everybody here this morning. I have to tell you that this Workforce Steering Committee truly put in the time, the effort, and their hours. There was rarely a meeting where we had individuals who missed the meeting. They're very dedicated to doing what they needed to do. And out of this, though, came really the recognition for the need for local, state, and legislative policy reform. So this really is a call to action today. I'm going to try to be a little bit more energetic than Joy. I think she had me hands down. I'm told I'm energetic, but wow, she was great. That this really is the call to action. This is where the work really begins. So what the Workforce Steering Committee did do coming out of this, and you'll see it in your packets today, is really developed a set of kind of 6 focus areas for legislative and policy reform that we can put into buckets, and you'll see there are several items under each of those areas. One was licensing and credentialing. The second was supervision and training, higher education, contracting, documentation, and parity. Some examples in these areas include evaluating and reconsidering increasing the required ratio of 1 licensed clinician to 3 associates in contracting to align with industry standards. And that would be at a county admin policy level. Bringing additional workforce online by increasing capacity, efficiency, and timing for throughput of licensing and credentialing, especially if you're coming in from out of state. Also, allowing individuals to practice within their full scope of their license, and that would be state legislation. A few other areas are setting cost standards across state-funded higher education institutions at the state level, creating more staffing stability by evaluating and reforming the county contracting process that happens here by our county board actions. Parity, very important for our FQHCs in particular, allowing for same-day billing for physical and mental health visits, and that's at a state and federal level. And then, of course, documentation reform, which we've already heard a lot about this morning, and that's also state and county admin level. So these are just a few examples of the solutions being offered that has come out of this report today. You've heard a lot of solutions this morning, a lot that we can do in a very short term, and a lot that are going to take some time. But this is where your voice has to be heard, as Nate said earlier today, and I'm just so envious of his skill and his ability for his spoken word, but to tell your story. And that's part of what NAMI San Diego is all about. We have our lived experience, we share our stories, and tell them before the other person. Be able to get out there, get in front. So again, this is a call to action to be proactive, get involved in particular, support your local associations, your MHCA, your ADSPAs, California Alliance, CCHBA. Get involved. We need everybody to coalesce together during this time to really read through that report. Read through some of those legislative items. See what you're passionate about, what hits home to you, and please get involved. Everybody's heard the saying, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. This is our time to go together and make this happen. Thank you.
Thanks, Catherine. I know many of you in the room have the ability to advance this platform in different ways. So I encourage you to connect with Catherine and Karen Sumek from the Hospital Association of San Diego and Imperial Counties to get involved. In our final discussion today, we will discuss the psychiatrist shortage. The report calls for a $64 million local investment to train 84 psychiatrists and 200 psychiatric mental health nurse practitioners to work in integrated teams in community settings. Dr. Steve Coe, chair of the Community Psychiatry Program at UCSD Health, has been leading the charge in addressing the shortage of community psychiatrists and will discuss what this investment could mean for San Diego. He will be joined by his colleague, Jeanette Shea, Vice President of Grant Making at Price Philanthropies and longtime philanthropic support of innovations in community psychiatry education and training. Welcome, Dr. Coe and Jeanette.
We'll sit below our heads so you guys know.
I thought we should switch so you could see if you could guess which one we You want to go first?
I will go first. One of my colleagues told me to change this picture, but I am never going to. I'm pretty sure the picture was taken when I first started medical school, and I haven't aged a bit, as you can tell. I'm from UCSD. I'm a formerly geriatric psychiatry trained physician. I oversee our general division as the chief there, but my big passion really is in public sector and community mental health. And so I oversee our community psychiatry program, which has been supported by the county and more recently from Price Philanthropies. And so I'm very happy to be here.
I'm Jeanette Lauren Shea, and I have the privilege of working at Price Philanthropies Foundation, which many of you know is the foundation that is started by Saul and Robert Price with the legacy that they leave from their founding of Price Club. We have a very strategic place-based initiative in City Heights and then investing in the community of San Diego overall. Our foundation about 5 years ago started a very strategic mental health initiative, and it's focused on workforce, new care models, and also how we increase access to care, particularly for the diverse communities where Price is so focused in our work. And so it really was a privilege and an incredible opportunity when we started talking with Dr. Koh and others about how we might look at training a new workforce for seeing particularly our children and youth. And one of the things that we learned is that we knew that that the world was changing and that we weren't going to have enough psychiatrists to see everyone. And we knew that psych MPs were going to play an increasingly important role in our care delivery system. But what we found is that the training for psych MPs, particularly in San Diego, had no child and adolescent component. So while they didn't get any training in child and adolescent care, when they became licensed, they were fully able to see kids. And that seemed like a challenge we wanted to work together on to solve. And so what came out of it was a program, a first of its kind, Child and Adolescent Fellowship Program, that is embedded in our community psychiatry program at UCSD. Very important, so that if they're going to be working with physicians, they're training together in that space for the highest quality training program that we could have. I would be remiss, and I just want to particularly call out Alex Sistema, who's not sitting on the stage with us today, but is here in the audience and truly does all the day-to-day work in terms of crafting the program, rolling out the program, and maintaining its accreditation. So, Alex, I want to acknowledge you and thank you. And I'll stop there and let you explain a little bit more about what the fellowship does.
Yeah, so I think one of the important things that I hope people take away from this has to do with not just workforce, but how we're supposed to provide the best workforce for our community. And this is not just about integration or optimization. It's also about harmonization of how we provide that type of care. When you look at psychiatric care, our legacy has always been this sort of siloed approach to things. We have different providers providing different elements of a person's care. If you think about it though, every single one of us in this room may not have a broken bone one day or have some sort of a disease, cancer or other things. But every single one of us in this room knows what it feels like to be anxious, to be depressed, to feel a little bit of paranoia, nervousness, kind of like what I felt as I was standing out there before I coming up. So we know this could affect every single one of us. And yet, one of our pet peeves at UCSD, and Dr. Malik, who's here, could vouch for this, anytime one of our residents or medical students say, when we ask them, who did you see? And if they say, I just saw a schizophrenic, right? Our response is, no, you did not see a schizophrenic. You saw Mr. Jones. You saw Mrs. Garcia, who happens to have schizophrenia. And how we treat those individuals has to be tailored. And so to us, having psychiatrists function in silos, when we are the most invested workforce that costs the most to train ourselves, and not share that knowledge base is wrong. And the importance of bringing on advanced practice providers, training our psychiatry workforce so that we are not functioning as siloed workforce, but rather as a conductor, if you will, of an orchestra, that's what we want. And that's where our future should be. Because Mr. Jones, Mrs. Garcia deserves a tailored harmonization of the workforce to target what they actually need. not just this random, idea about what a schizophrenia is, right? And that's where we need to go. And so a child adolescent psychiatrist should not be just in a siloed office somewhere seeing one patient one after the other. No, that person should be leading a team and understand what peer specialists could do, because perhaps a child may need more social work versus less medication, because medication is not the answer for everything, right? And we know that. And so for us, collaborating with University of San Diego, with Cal State San Marcos, to work with our NP and other colleagues of medical background to try to leverage our expertise in this way allows us to care for a larger patient population. That's what we want to do. And the fellowship is one step towards that.
One of the things that we're quite proud of with the UCST team and what they have done is that they've really made San Diego a leader in this space. The Child and Adolescent Fellowship Program is the first in the country to be accredited. It was accredited with distinction because there's nothing like it. And I mean, we're really the first. And this is a really big deal. And we want to stay that way, right? We don't want to just have one program that's training 4 fellows a year. We want to use this as a model for how we extend our workforce, and we want to be known as the San Diego model that everyone else is copying. But we're still leading, because at the end of the day, this is really about our community getting the care that they deserve.
Yeah, and I want to bring this to folks' attention, because even though we could train as many people as we like, but there's still barriers. We've been able to bring the Price Philanthropies support to bear by ensuring that we developed amazing curriculum, rotational experiences, faculty, physicians, and others who are able to train psych NPs. And we've done this, without having access to county clinics, actually, right? And so we've been funded by the public sector to train folks to see public sector patients, but we have not been able to actually provide that care in community sites. So this is one example of some barriers that still exist today, and this needs to be changed. The program has been successful enough that we have other UCs, including UCSF, who are about to launch a similar program like ours, right? And so they are asking us for the way that we've set this up. It kind of hurts my soul to release it, but we're a public university. And so they're going to be doing this at one of their county clinics, actually, right? And we're not able to do that here. And so that's one example of what we could do more to improve access to this type of provider group. Now, it doesn't just end there, right? So community psychiatry program, we have 2 slots per year for psychiatry residents to apply from all over the world, right? Dr. Malik gets 500 plus applicants from across the world, and we can only accept 2. In fact, he struggles trying to figure out which 20 he wants to interview every year. We have a brand new psychiatry residency program in an FQHC, a family health center that's about to launch in 2024, right? They also are going to need placement sites and an ease in which to bring trainees into the clinical realm. And so we need to support those things. We have 2 schools of nurse practitioners, hopefully under Karen McCulley's leadership. I saw it earlier today. SDSU will hopefully launch their program in about a couple of years. And I'll be remiss not to mention physician associates or physician assistant programs in San Diego, right? There will be 3 or 4 that's going to launch in the next few years. These are medically trained workforce that we not only have to work together with, but to ensure that when they are training in community sites, and those training sites make that training easy for them, they will stay, right? They will not leave. It was mentioned earlier, San Diego is a hard place to leave. Look at this. This is beautiful, right? And so we don't have to sell the city. We don't have to sell the county. We have elected officials. We have other folks who are champions in this area. What we need to do is make sure that these areas that they get to train in is in the realm where the public sector patients are being served. Like I mentioned earlier, all of us may face mental health crisis in some point in our lives. All of us do. And I will tell you, and I'm a new dad. I have an 11-month-old, and during lunch, if you guys want to get a laugh at how crazy that was, Asked me about like what I thought about his teeth, and I'll tell you. And I swear I am a doctor. And I look at him and I ask myself, like, I get worried, right? It's almost as if every time my wife leaves the room, my goal with him is like, I look at him and say, like, listen, like, just don't die until she comes back. And I worry about him because I think about all the potential negative things that could happen. But there's a flip side to that, which is even though every single one of us may be in danger of having mental health issues, every single one of us, if we could overcome it, have a bright future ahead of us. And so my son, I want him to have that hope moving forward as he ages, right? And I want our patients not to be defined by the disease, but by the work that we do and by tailoring that work to that individual, they will have a future and have a hope that they would never have had before. And so that's our hope. And it's not going to come down to just medications, and I'm telling you, right, it's not going to come down to just social work. It's not going to come down to just peer support specialists. It's going to take everyone. And this workforce report, I think, illustrates that point, that it can't just be one group, and it can't just be limited to one scope of a practice, but in totality, we could actually make progress in this county that nowhere else in the country has ever done before. And so I think that's what's exciting about it.
And I just want to close with what an opportunity this is for philanthropy. Because, in philanthropy, one of our biggest challenges is finding these key initiatives that won't be dependent on philanthropy forever. And I think in the space of healthcare, when we look at the government funding sources that are available, the third-party payers that can be brought online, it's a real opportunity for philanthropy to be the seed funding. And I feel like the PsycMP Child Adolescent Fellowship really embodies this. It has 5 years of funding for Price Philanthropies that tapers towards the end of the grant. While we've proven the concept, we've made sure the curriculum's in place, we made sure the accreditation was in place, and then the training sites these providers are able to bill. And so we're able to build, or Dr. Koh was able to build, a financial model where the billing then picks up and sustains the program ongoing. And I think that, given the talent that's in this room, given the commitment from our elected officials and philanthropy that's here in the San Diego region and across the nation, we should be able to come together to start and launch some of these pilots that would be very exciting in the coming years. And we look forward to working with all of you on those initiatives.
Thanks, everybody.
All right. We have now come to the conclusion of our first annual Behavioral Health Symposium. I say first because we know that we are only at the beginning of this journey towards resolving the worker shortage challenge we discussed today. I want to thank all of the speakers for sharing their expertise, but more importantly, for conveying to you the urgency with which we need to act. Please do share the article written by Paul Sisson in the Union Tribune as he conveys in no uncertain terms, quote, the absolute revolution that is needed in San Diego in terms of how mental health care is provided. As far as next steps, I am pleased to share that Assemblymember Brian Mainshine has awarded the San Diego Workforce Partnership with $5 million towards the development of a peer support specialist training program. We plan to provide more details around this funding opportunity on September 13th during a press conference at our offices. By now, you all recognize that while $5 million is certainly a step in the right direction, we have a ways to go as far as building the initial $128 million investment needed to attract, train, and retain the 18,500 additional workers needed in our region. If there's one number you take away from today, please make it that. The San Diego Workforce Partnership stands ready to lead the efforts to ensure that the recommendations discussed today are fully realized, with an eye towards equity and diversity. We now have a clear roadmap of tangible projects to begin implementing. So as Chair Fletcher often says, Let's get to work. Thank you once again for your engagement this morning. I want to thank all of our volunteers who participated in bringing this event together, and also remind you all that this is, again, just the beginning, and have a wonderful rest of your day.